Love Thy Body by Nancy Pearcey sat on my bookshelf at home for about 2 years before I even noticed that my wife owned this one. It took a recommendation for another pastor for me to realize that Love Thy Body was not a book on how women should love their bodies regardless of their size and shape, but it is a theologically rich book that touches on everyday life and should be read by all leaders in the church and leaders at home regarding the importance of the physical body for our sanctification and daily lives. And when it comes to the toxic war on masculinity, do not make the mistake that this book is only for men. In fact, many women who have suffered at the hands of men who are toxic will benefit from this book more than anyone else, as Nancy shares both her own history with an abusive father and important steps every family and church should make to confront the toxicity among us and help the women and children who are suffering under it. The scope of this book is broad, covering hundreds of years of popular views on manhood. The applications are personal, as she dives into how we view men today in comparison to how they are presented in Scripture. This is a book that is crucial for today, and let me tell you why. Welcome to Rev Reads. If you want to discover more books that touch on the deepest and most fundamental issues of our lives today, please subscribe to the channel to stay up with the most current reviews. And also like this video, share it with other people on social media to help them know about the work of Nancy Pearcey. There are obviously problems with men in American society today. There always have been problems with men, but they seem more pronounced today, thanks to mass shootings, the violence in our streets, and the ever-distressing statistics on all forms of sexual assault. There is a cancer of toxicity in our men, but our society has treated the cancer in men as if we are physicians, who, when presented with a patient with cancer, we say, the only way to stop the spread of the cancer is to deprive the cancer of oxygen. If the patient can't breathe, in a few minutes, the cancer will die. Now, the patient and his family might respond with, "But that would kill him!" And we, as the doctor, would then calmly respond, "That's an unfortunate side effect, but the good news is the cancer will be dead." Our world is trying to kill toxic masculinity by killing all masculinity. You can see this illustrated in pop culture. I have 4 kids, 2 girls, 14 and 13, and 2 boys, 11 and 9. I remember being thrilled when Bob Iger first announced that Disney needed more characters for boys. Disney was great for girls, but I wanted at my time an infant son to have something for him when he gets to be older. So Disney went out and bought Marvel. And then Star Wars. And I was like, yes, something for my boys to do while surrounded by all the princesses. But then masculinity became the toxic thing it is today in culture. And instead of writing male characters with courage, chivalry, respect for women, they erased the men altogether. They replaced Luke Skywalker with Rey, Thor with the mighty Thor, Hawkeye with Girl Hawkeye, and Iron Man with Iron Heart. The goal isn't to cleanse the virus of toxicity from men, but to kill masculine men altogether, and to replace them with a superior femininity, which is a kind of weird femininity as well. And what the toxic war on masculinity does so well in an engaging narrative, it tracks how we got to this place where manhood has been sacrificed on the altar of progress. Pearcey roots the road to toxicity as starting in the Industrial Revolution, when men were first removed from their homes, separated from their wives and kids, creating a man who was no longer instrumental in the business of the home, the raising of his children, and the faith of his household. And what is so great about this book is how Nancy doesn't brush over the church's role in shaping manhood into such an ugly caricature of God's design. She doesn't leave anyone off the hook. She shows how the reform movements led by women with harsher and harsher criticisms of men led to denouncing all men as toxic. And since she is a woman in the church, the places where one might assume Nancy would overlook or discount a certain group's contribution to the problem in order to lay the blame at the feet of, let's say, progressive atheists, you don't see her take that road at all, but she shines the light on how so many in the church, as well as those outside the church, such as those promoting Darwinism, all created this culture where men became viewed as these untamable beasts who must sow their seed wherever they can, and who are oddly, at the same time, viewed as the pinnacle of evolution, higher than women. And so we created this weird mixture today where men are both barbaric cavemen who need to go back to their roots in the wilderness, and also real men are the best of all humanity. And as an example, going through this track in history, she brings up the Berenstain Bears at one point. The Berenstain Bears! I grew up with my mom reading me these books. We have a shelf of about 20 of these books at home for our kids. Surely she would talk about how Ma and Pa Bear are good examples. No. Even the Berenstain Bears were exposed for their role in portraying fathers as bumbling dummies who needed to be parented along with their kids. And what's so great about this book is that it's not this, let's have fun tearing down all the things that are problems with men and point out all the reasons that men are awful and all the ways we got into this terrible place. But this book is really uplifting more than discouraging. As throughout the book, Nancy never fails to point out the positives in manhood, the benefits of fathers in the lives of their children, the good for women when their husbands are strong, godly leaders. She's here to point out where it all went wrong, and that is in large part failing to recognize what truly brings men happiness. And what brings a man happiness and fulfillment is relationships. It is healthy, close, and loving relationships. The men with the best sex lives are those who are faithful and emotionally connected to their wives. Those are also the women with the best sex lives as well. The men who are most fulfilled in life are not successful at work, but it's those who are involved in the lives of their kids, deeply connected to their families, as well as connected to their churches. What men need to cleanse out of themselves is toxicity. And the way that they do that is by becoming emotionally invested with their wives, experientially connected with their kids, and consistent in their place in the church. Much of what she called for was more natural before the industrial age, as so much of life revolved around the family home and the farm, and even businesses were often connected with all members of the family serving in various aspects of the business together. Church was seen more as a staple of family lives, and fathers were encouraged to be the leader in home worship and not mothers. So Nancy writes, when people talk about restoring the traditional family, typically they are not being traditional enough. Often they are thinking back to the 1950s, but they should think back to the pre-industrial age. We need to go back to traditional families where dad is intimately involved in all of the family's life. And what is so great about this book is that Nancy weaves into the narrative dozens of different ways for men to increase their involvement with their wives and kids and the entire home today. In the post-industrial age, we need a dramatic reorientation of the family. And Nancy's book is an ideal initial push to help steer us in the right direction. This book should be considered a staple for young couples to read in premarital counseling. It should be a must-read for churches to wake them up on how we should respond to the abuse of men who are in our midst. I think the one complaint I have about the toxic war on masculinity is that Pearcey talks about how it is possible in this post-industrial world for men to take their work everywhere, on their smartphones and their laptops. Now anybody can work anywhere for so many jobs. So you can be at home with your kids while also checking your emails. You can go and sit while your child's at practice and do some work while they're running around on the field. And I think that might end up being more of a curse than a blessing. You see, when your work can go anywhere, it can be assumed by employers that family time can always be broken into by work. So I wish there had been a stronger warning about the possible downside of being the dad who is present at the daughter's dance recital while being emotionally and mentally absent because he's doing work at the same time. Now, there is a toxicity in our men, but the blame should not be placed on manhood or masculinity, any more than you would blame your own liver or your lungs for the cancer that was in them. You attack the cancer by doing as little damage to the organs of your body as possible. The toxic war on masculinity shows that since the dawn of the industrial age, we have been attacking toxic masculinity, but we've been going after it in the wrong way. We've been going after all forms of manhood. So now it's time to flip the script and see that toxic masculinity can only be overcome through the strength of godly masculinity. And the one warning light that this book should shine before all churches is that the most abusive men in America are the ones who rarely or occasionally attend church. Those who are on the periphery of the church know some of the language of headship and submission, but have not learned the fullness of maturity and how headship and submission are both rooted in sacrificial love. And so we need to pull those men on the periphery into the church. We need to get them into mature relationships with Christ so that they can be ones who see how headship, how leadership is rooted in the love that they should have for their family. Now, I could go on talking about this book for days. It was great. I thought it was even better than Love Thy Body. The structure's a little bit tighter in this book. It tells a narrative throughout that is more straightforward. I think the action steps in this book are even more clear on what steps a reader should take. Love Thy Body is timely. It's deserving of all the praise that it has been given. But Nancy Pearcey, in my opinion, has stepped up her game with the toxic war on masculinity.